Good morning, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to CMRTA Division 4 webinar series number 2. Presenting today's topic is Connor Duckworth from HBL Companies, how to best utilize online business licensing and revenue capabilities. Since we're short on time, we'll let Connor begin whenever he's ready.
All right, thank you, Caesar. Appreciate everyone for coming. And I hope that a lot of you attended our webinar number 1, which was actually last week. And we had a great panel and answered a lot of questions regarding COVID and how cities and counties are working on that and what they're doing to solve some of the issues, whether it's related to financial hardship or some great tips that we could all share with each other on how to move forward through it all. All right, so once again, I would really like to thank the CMRTA for allowing me to present this webinar number 2. This webinar will be saved online, both on the CMRTA homepage, and we will email it out to you if you received our email in the past to connect with that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start. If you guys happen to have any questions throughout the presentation, there is a chat function available. You can go ahead and click on the chat function. It's a Q&A, and I'll be able to see it. And at the end of the session, I will go ahead and answer some of your questions regarding some of these. And if you have a similar question related to it, I can try to answer that as well too. So don't worry about if it's not specifically related to online ability, but if it's something in that wheelhouse, I can try to answer as well. Great. All right, let's get started. All right, so I have a couple of questions for some people here. Let me go ahead and let me get them on the line. All right, so Caesar, what is your renewal period?
Our renewal period, matter of fact, it is December 31st. So it's every year they expired on December 31st.
Perfect. So and then Rosa, how about you?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Our renewal period is a month. It's on a monthly basis, so it's a year from the actual filing date or registration date.
Okay, so every month you have to print out new renewals.
Correct.
Perfect. So that's a great number. We actually have one that's on an annual basis and one that's on what we call a reoccurring basis. All right. So Caesar, is your license regulatory?
Yeah, correct. It is regulatory.
How about you, Rosa?
Ours is just for revenue generating purposes. So no, it is not regulatory.
Perfect. So there are two different ways to do it. So Caesar mentioned his is regulatory, meaning that you have to have permission from various departments or other steps to move forward for that business. And Rosa mentioned that the city of San Diego is fiduciary, meaning that you need to, that the licenses are issued, but there's no regulatory aspects. It's for the sole purpose of collecting revenue. All right, Caesar, do you guys have penalties? And what are your penalties?
We do. I send out my renewals in mid-November. Like I said, they expire December 31st, and then they have till January 1st to renew. After January 1st, the first month is 15%, and then it goes 15, 30, 40, and 60 will be the top, the max penalties.
Okay, so you max out at 60%.
Correct.
And then Rosa, how about you?
We do assess penalties, and that is $25 on the 16th day. So you have 15 days to file or to pay your renewal. On the 16th day, if we have not received your payment, we will assess a $25 fee. Then it's 1% each month. So it's a compounding interest.
Okay. Yeah, so we have interest as well. That's a great point. Some cities just do a flat rate. That will be a reoccurring type, and others will do an interest that will be on the history of the account until they actually pay their penalty. All right, let's go to our next question. Um, do you currently utilize your software to email notices, letters, and certificates to the taxpayers? Caesar.
I normally, yes, use emails and letters. The certificates are mailed out directly to the taxpayers.
How about you, Rosa?
We do. We use a third-party vendor to send our renewals and our late notices. So we have a printer, and then we use another company who does the mailing.
Yeah, and that's a great point for using a third-party vendor if you're going to do any of the printing services. It oftentimes is a little cheaper because they get the bulk rate for postage. And for those of you that can afford it and have that ability, a lot of times they'll print it out, they'll stuff the envelopes. So that's a really cool benefit that you can do if you have those resources. We do have a question from the audience as well, so I'll go with Caesar first. About how many renewals do you send out a year?
Last year I did 5,200.
Okay, and for the city of Coachella, that's about a medium-sized city in California, so that's a good number. And Rosa, you're with San Diego, so you have a much, much larger city. So do you know approximately how many renewals you guys send out?
Ooh, that's a tough one. This would be for 1 year.
Yeah.
God, if I had to estimate, I would probably say about 70,000 per year.
Wow, that is a
Yep.
big
Yeah,
number. Yep, and
yeah.
that's just renewals. I mean, I'm sure you're printing up more of your letters and your balance due sheets and all those other things. So and we have some cities on here that are joining the call today that are a smaller city. They may only have maybe 1,000, 3,000 renewals. So it all varies based on each city. All right, I think we have one more question here. Oh, no, we don't. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'll go ahead and have any questions if you want to add in at the end, and perhaps we can add some people back on for their answers too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the rest of the presentation. Okay, so we apply, we renew, remit, pay, search, update, and many more functionalities through our online business licenses and various other tax types. So allowing the taxpayer the full freedom to do any of these from their home, office, or even their phone enhances the experiences and eases the burden of paper forms and the manual payment processing for staff. So that's a huge thing, especially now in the COVID time. We know that city halls are closed or county offices are closed and people can't go in and typically do the normal payment at the front counter. So having the ability to pay online or renew online, print the notices, email the notices are a great aspect now more than ever. So this presentation is going to feature some helpful tips from staff who have been in your shoes working in local government to help make the most out of your online capabilities. All right, so we talked about this a little bit earlier with Caesar and Rosa, the types of renewal periods. So we have your annual renewal period, which in the case of Caesar in the city of Coachella, it's January 1 and they expire on December 31st. Some cities are on a fiscal year, which starts on July 1st and expires on June 30th. Some of them will be all done annually on a different date, meaning that some cities might do it on March 1st and they expire February 28th of each year. Some of them might do September 1st and it's the entire batch all on that same time. In the case of what the city of San Diego is doing, they have 12 months from the start date. So it's a reoccurring one. There's also an option sometimes of 12 months from the last day of the month started. So in the case of some of our clients out there, we've seen that they might start their application, let's say June 2nd or June 3rd, so today, but they're going to renew next year on June 30th. So it's almost like a 13-month type thing. We have semi-annually. A lot of cities or counties are doing this, so it's every 6 months. These are the ones that might not have a prorated amount, but just do a 6-month renewal. Some are quarterly, monthly, weekly, and some are daily. Now, those monthly, weekly, and daily, those are often going to be, as you guys know, some of your vendors. Maybe they're a solicitor. If you have a swap meet or a farmer's market or a big fair that you guys have, obviously the fairs aren't really going on right now for this year, but farmers markets are still happening. So those are often the ones that are going to be, and you have to be up to date on those, and you're going to probably open them up, make sure they pay, and then close them right at the end of that period. So I touched on this a little earlier. Do you offer proration? For those of you that don't know what proration is, we had a couple legal cases in California that are requiring a lot of cities and more to offer some sort of proration, or as I mentioned, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly type thing, meaning that if a business is a full year, let's say they start January 1st of their renewal period and end December 31st, perhaps they have a proration. Let's say they start in June, they'd be prorated for 6 months. So Caesar mentioned that the city of Coachella does prorate. So that is a good thing. And those of you that don't, I would definitely look into it because more and more times we are seeing some legal cases where proration might be mandated. So you might be okay right now, but if somebody challenges you, you might have to change your code. All right, penalties and interest. We talked about this as well. Make sure that you guys know when your penalties kick in, and are you sending second or final notices via email? If you're not, we're going to talk about that today. You should be sending them your first notices, obviously, but your second and final via email because it's cheaper, right? I mean, you can do it for free via email instead of having to pay to service or to send it out yourself via mail. What's your penalty structure? We talked to Rosa and Caesar, and those vary. You guys, do they have 100% cap? In the case of some of them, we mentioned it could be a 50%, 60, 25. Do you cap your penalties as well? Do you pay per period, like 25% per month, per quarter? How does that work? Do you charge interest? Interest is for those of you that are doing code modifications, remember that if you are changing your tax code and it does involve your business tax, you're most likely going to have to go to the voting public who is out there. So make sure that if you are changing your taxes or your interest or penalties, that you do consult your city attorney or your county council for that, because changing a tax is now, for the most part, having to go out to the voting public. If it's a fee change, that's just your board of supervisors or your city council change. That's real quick. So if you're doing that, it's a little easier. Does your interest accrue through the longevity of the account? So meaning that if a business is late by or overdue, delinquent for a number of years, does your interest keep accruing over and over again? And do you have the authority to waive penalties and interest? Meaning that do you have the authority, or does your supervisor, finance director, city manager, etc.? All right. So types of revenue that can be tracked online. All right, so these are just a few different sources of revenue that can be tracked online. So does your admin services, finance, revenue department best utilize these options? So we're talking a lot about business licensing, but that's not the only thing that we can track online, right? So a lot of you are tracking your transient occupancy or your lodging tax online, short-term rental licensing, registration. Some of you that have cannabis, are you tracking that online? Utility user taxes, rent control or rent stabilization. That's going to be more prominent than ever. For rent control, just a quick side note, we'll probably be talking about it in our legislative update type webinar in a couple weeks. But year after year, we keep seeing rent control or rent stabilization bills coming through the legislature. Now more than ever, we're going to see a lot more, especially with the caps. I mean, this year we saw a huge turn where we had to actually stop rent control or not allow evictions for those that couldn't pay rent due to COVID. So expect those to be coming on for the next year as well. We have animal licensing. So if you guys have pet licensing, are you tracking that online? If not, it's a great way to keep track of them and renew that licensing. Rental unit registration. For those of you that don't know, this is actually a really popular trend outside of California, and it's getting more and more popular in California, meaning that cities are actually tracking their rental units inside the city. So it's a little different from short-term rentals, which is a quick turnaround, like a TOT type thing. These are actually people that do long-term rentals or short-term rentals, and the city wants to know how many people are in that city that are actually utilizing rental abilities, and they'll charge per unit or per property as well. Business improvement districts. We've seen a lot of those pop up lately. Those are usually downtown corridors or a certain corridor in your city or county that is utilized for an extra tax to help increase business in that area. Maybe you have, let's say, I'll take the city of San Diego, for instance. The gas lamp district or the downtown area might be a great area if you don't have it for a business improvement district to really help with a lot of the marketing, a lot of the tourist abilities and tourism type things on there. Parking tax. So parking tax, this could be a monthly occurrence like TOT or quarterly type thing where you charge a parking structure or a parking lot, a flat rate for how many times somebody rents a space in that area. Annual parking permits. So we track annual parking permits, right? A lot of cities are doing, maybe you have a certain area of your city that requires a permit. So people that don't have a permit are able to go in and have to park there either with a temporary permit or an overnight permit, and then you grant a yearly permit or an annual permit to those that live there for residents. So how many of you are tracking that? You can all do that online. Fire paramedic annual billing. So we know that you guys have fire fees and maintenance fees and inspection fees. Are those being tracked online? And then of course, garage sales. So garage sales, some cities do a cap. They might have 3, they might have 4 a year. Some might not have a cap, but you can also track your garage sales. And like I said, there's so many more different options that we can track online that you might not be thinking about. All right, so let's talk about optimizing email functionality. So capturing email addresses. One of the most important keys to a successful email utilization is capturing the email address from anyone applying or renewing, remitting their payment. So the more email addresses that you can capture, the easier and more cost-effective it is to contact the taxpayer. So as we mentioned, does your software have that ability to capture email? If not, it should. I mean, we're in the year 2020. We should have the ability for software to capture that. Does your application and renewal or remittance forms have a field for the taxpayer to add their email? If they don't, please try to add that to your forms because we need to be able to have a quick way to contact those businesses and a cost-effective way as well too. So whether it is a different tax type like a TOT or a cannabis or any of those other things that we talked about, or a business license, capture that email because a lot of times it's the quickest and easiest way. Because if you go through mail, it's going to take you multiple days. Where email, you might get a response in a couple of hours. Also, it beats trying to call somebody up and leave voicemails and see if they're home or they're going to not want to answer your call. So just try to track as many emails as you can and make that the most utilized functionality possible. Forms and external links. So let's talk about attaching renewal forms, letters, and certificates to your email. does your software, or if not, does Outlook or whatever you use to send out those emails, have the ability to attach forms, letters, and certificates? I mean, that's the easiest way. Like I said, they'll save on mailing costs, they'll save on so much more. So you can attach also supplemental forms for capturing possible unlicensed businesses. So when I was working on the city side, we had a number of forms that we would use to capture possible unlicensed businesses. So for the case of maybe a grocery store or a supermarket or a liquor store, we might want to capture those delivery trucks, who are taking those in there, who's doing a vendor, who are the various tenants. If you're a property owner, you want to capture what tenants are at the location. Because if you're working at City Hall, you might not know who is in every single shopping center or every single business area in your location, but the property owner needs to know. So now in the case if you're a regulatory agency, like Caesar mentioned, Coachella is, or if you're a fiduciary type agency like San Diego, you're going to put these forms out and send these forms out. But like you said, you really have no hard way to keep the business owner or taxpayer from sending those forms back, unless it's in your code, like TOT, obviously. If they're having exemptions and they're paying online, you're going to want those exemption forms back. So that might be in the code. But most of the time, supplemental forms might not be in the code. So if they don't return it, you can send them out again and keep sending them out. But you might not be able to hold their license certificate hostage, what we call it, to until they submit those forms back to you. So know what you are. That's really important. Your contractor workers as well, right? So at a location, who's that? Hopefully you're working with your business, your business licensing with your building, your code enforcement, your planning divisions. So if they do have businesses that are working out there, maybe a building or pulling permits, if they're contacting you right away to make sure that they have a business license. Who are the service providers at that location, right? So who are the alarm companies? Who's servicing the fire extinguisher annually? You might have a security guard. You might have a gardener that services the location, or a cleaning, a custodial company. So no, those are cool things to know as well that you might not be thinking about. Number of machines. So maybe you have a location that a lot of cities or counties charge per unit based on machines. So so this could be based on maybe you have a vending machine, maybe you have a like an arcade type machine. I know in a city that I used to work in, we had an indoor swap meet. This indoor swap meet had 130 plus arcade machines, and we charged per arcade machine, and it was a pretty expensive deal. So they never paid for years and years and years until we went in there and actually counted all the numbers of machines. So make sure that you know who's out there. Have your boots on the ground and find out who's paying. Or a laundromat. Are you doing gross receipts for some of these things too? Attach forms that may be requested from other departments. So maybe your building or planning department has certain forms you go through that you need to capture in order to fully implement that business license. And of course, adding a link to your email where a taxpayer can pay online, or where they can go to download that attachment. We had a question come in that asks, are you getting authorization to send emails to customers? That's a good question. And for that, it really depends on your software and your policy, right? So a lot of software agencies will have a little button that will say, do you authorize the city to send emails to you? And if you click yes, then great. You can send an email to them. Sometimes if they click no, maybe you want to contact them by the mail functionality still. All right. So email ahead of paper notices. So do you print out paper notices and then also remittance forms? You know what? I'm gonna ask someone from the audience here. Let's see here. I'm gonna ask Shelley. Shelley is from the city of Vacaville, and I'm gonna ask her how she does her renewals. Shelley, go ahead. Oh, Shelley? Well, it looks like she might have some difficulty over there. All right, not a problem. We can continue then. So when I worked at the city, we would email those with addresses 2 or 3 weeks in advance of printing the paper copies, meaning that, so for instance, in the case of Caesar, right? So I've worked at cities that are a full period, that whether it's July 1st or whether it's December, December 31st was the expiration period, and we would do it all at once. So in the case of that, Caesar mentioned he sends them out about November or so. If that was the case, I would probably send them out maybe the second or third week of November. But for email, I would email them out maybe the end of October, beginning of November, a few weeks ahead of time. Why? Because it's free. You don't have to pay anything. So this allows the city the ability to pay online, spread out the workload, ease the burden of renewing paper copies, and most importantly, save on printing, postage, mailing, and the labor it takes to fold and stuff the envelopes. Because if you're emailing out 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, by the time that it gets to you in your normal period, you're going to have the ability to have probably, let's say you have 5,000 licenses that you're doing all at once, maybe 2,000 that you do through email before they even get the paper copy. That 2,000 is going to add up a lot when it comes to postage, labor costs, and spreading the workload out. So you're not processing 5,000 all at once and all through the mail or in person. You can spread that workload out online. The customer fills out a lot of time what they're supposed to pay. It's a lot easier. Let me ask Rosa from the city of San Diego what she does for her city.
Hi. What we do is when we do send our renewals, we do offer the option of the customer they can register online for e-billing, so that will allow our bills to go directly through email. But they have to register first, because those email addresses can change. You have one email address and then the next year they have a different one. So we don't use what we have on file. It's up to them to register. So we do offer that capability to register online, and then they will receive the renewal, and they can also have the option of printing the certificate.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, like Rosa said, a lot of software does offer the ability to print the certificate as well. And if not, then you could attach it directly through a bulk email. Another good thing that Rosa mentioned was make sure that you are looking at those email addresses, maybe going through them if you can on an annual basis when you have some downtime before renewal season, or maybe have a clerk or maybe an intern if the city has one in your finance or admin services department to go through those emails, because you're going to get a lot of bounce back emails. And it could be just a simple period that's in the wrong spot. Maybe instead of saying .com, you forget the O and it's just .cm. I mean, we've seen it all. Or some of them you can really recognize and fix right away, but a lot of them you might not be able to. So you'll be able to see in your system which ones are actually bouncing back or not. We do have a question from Nielsen. It looks like city of Chula Vista. He asks, does HDL schedule emails to be sent ahead of time? Unfortunately, right now, HDL does not have that ability, but there might be some other software out there that does do that ahead of time. I'm not sure who does it. I'm not aware of any currently at the moment, but I know that a lot of agencies are looking at that. You also might be able to do that through your Outlook and schedule that on the back end through your IT department. Maybe, but I know in the case of our end for Nielsen, so what you would do is just print up ahead of time, maybe schedule a calendar or schedule a task that you want to have to notify yourself and your staff to be able to send those emails out on a reoccurring basis. It looks like it looks like Shelly. I'm going to try Shelly again. She just joined. Let me see if she's able to connect. Let me see here. All right, Shelly, are you able to connect? Nope, looks like her microphone is having some difficulty. That's what we get here in some of this technology that we're utilizing today. All right, so lower fees for online payments. So here's another great example. You can reduce processing fees on applications and renewals for paying online. We also have less staff time. We have customer inputs all the data and pays from their own computer. So no more opening envelopes, processing payments, and doing that all manually by hand. Also, this will save the taxpayer some money and encourages them to repeat their online payments annually. So for an example, when I was working on the city side of things, so we first got our software and we had the ability to pay online, and we really wanted to bring some of these taxpayers to the online portal right away because it might not be aware of it, right? So what we did was we lowered fees to pay online. So in the case of our fees, I say fees, not the tax, right? So because the fees are paying online, the tax you can't do it, like I mentioned before, without going to the taxpayer. But by doing fee-wise, you're able to do it. And for instance, let's say you had a processing fee for a new application of $75. But if you wanted to really encourage people to do it online, you can lower that. Maybe have a fee of $65 or even $50. I know for renewals, the agency that I worked for, we had a renewal fee of about $60 each year. And we lowered that renewal fee to about, I want to say $50 or even $45 based on the fee schedule and the annual auditing that we did each year. So this really brought the taxpayer to pay online. If you can save $10, $15, $20, even $25 at times to pay online, it's worth it for you to do it. It's definitely a good way to utilize that. Also, it will help the taxpayer reoccur that online payment over and over again. And once you get and capture those emails, you can have that ability to utilize that email address year after year to do that. I'm going to go ahead and pull it over to Sherry, and Sherry is from the city of Walnut Creek, and I'm going to have her just briefly talk about how the city of Walnut Creek does their license online process. Sherry, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We have spent our COVID-19 time calling all of our businesses that we did not have email addresses for. And we are currently sitting at 92% of our accounts have email addresses. So only 528 business license renewals will be mailed in the next couple of weeks. Everything else will go out electronically. When we send our second notices, those all go out by paper to capture those folks that have newer outdated email addresses.
Perfect. And are you utilizing like the attachments at all to attach a renewal or a letter or certificate or another form out?
What we do for that is our software allows us to create a PDF copy that the customer can print off their self. So what we do is we create a PDF of their renewal notice. It gets attached to their account, and the email that we send out gives them the option of either renewing online or printing off their hard copy of their renewal and mailing that back in. That saves us time and money for printing as well as mailing.
Great, thanks, Sherry. And we did mention that the numbers of people that are renewing online. I mean, like we said before, once they start actually capturing online, they're going to do it year after year because now more than ever they need to be doing it online. You can avoid them going into City Hall. And I know in the city that I started with, when we got our online ability, the first year we started, we had about 30%. And then we kept going up and we were setting goals in the city to try to maximize the people that could pay online. So we went from 30% one year, the next year we went up to about 37 and then up into the 40s. And I think now it's up into the 60s. And that city is a very cash-based city. Each city is going to be different too, right? So you want to know, and you guys know more than anybody else out there, what your city demographics are, what your business demographics are, and the population and how they typically pay. If you're a perhaps a lower income type city or a city that has lower income areas, you might be more of a cash-based type city. If you're a city that might be, or county that might be in the Bay Area where tech is king and everyone is very capable and has access to the internet, they're going to want to do it online. So it's really based on what you are, and make sure that you guys know and how to market that best to the city. We have Stephen Parker from the city of Upland just commented. He says that an online renewal takes a lot less effort than a paper one. His old city had a user fee study, which they completed each year or every couple of years to calculate the cost for each, which resulted in the different fees. So that's how you get away with it and how you can charge the fees. If you don't have a user fee study and you're just choosing fees at random, that might be subject to an issue with some sort of legal ramifications. But if you can prove that your user fee study takes into account the capabilities, then you can have that ability to adjust the fees, whether up or down. He mentioned that a lower fee for the online renewal encourages those businesses to really take advantage of that offer. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about some state mandated requirements. Is your agency up to date with the latest state legislative requirements? So let's talk about AB 2184. This came into place about January 1st of 2019. And there's a couple different items on this one. It's very complicated. It's a service of process, or otherwise called SOP. And the service of process has the ability for a business to mask their current address and be able to utilize that service of process for it. It's actually changed a lot of the way how we've been working with addresses. It's made it a little difficult for businesses that have been using it, especially for the planning side of things who like to approve it. But each city and county has utilized it a little differently. And so I'm not going to get into the details on that, but make sure that your software has the ability for that service of process. And also that bill also has the forms of ID, right? So back in the day, you used to be able to require a driver's license, a social security number, all different types of things. Well, if you require an SSN, this new law or newish law now requires you to replace that form of ID. So the SSN, if you require it in your code to collect it, the customer or taxpayer can now replace it with a different form of ID. That can be a driver's license, that can be a California ID, a federal tax ID number, an individual tax ID number, or a municipal tax ID or a municipal ID. Municipal IDs typically aren't that common. There's not too many agencies that are doing it, so I would avoid, unless your agency actually mandates that and collects it on the other side of things. So for instance, as an example, if Oakland requires a municipal ID, but the city of San Diego does not, the city of San Diego is taking a municipal ID, you might not know what the city of Oakland has and utilizes for that. So it might be difficult to collect the municipal ID, but there are various other forms of that ID out there. A passport is not a form of ID in this case, just FYI. Neither is a visa or any of those abilities. You need those. There's very specific to what forms of ID you can collect in that law. If you're unfamiliar, either reach out to me at the end and I can give you a little article that I wrote on it, or you can look online through the state legislature's page to find some more information on it. SB 205. All right, SB 205 came into play this year. It is a still controversial law, started January 1st regarding stormwater. I'm not going to get too much into detail on this one as well, but stormwater compliance is now mandated. So you do have that ability. Make sure that you are up to date with SB 205 and know that does your online software have the requirements approved by the State Water Resources Board. I know that in a couple of the other CMRTA presentations with the State Water Resources Board, they have highlighted various software companies that they've worked with that are up to date and up to standard. So you might want to check with your software because you might be in violation if you're not collecting the proper fields for SB 205. So let's talk about AB 3002. This is the disability access information. You do have to post this online and if requested at the front counter. So you should have copies at the front counter in case anybody requests it. I'm not sure how many people have actually requested it over the last year and a half that it's been implemented. However, if you don't have it online, it's very smart to have it online. Looks like we have a couple questions on here. Rosa has asked, can you elaborate a little bit on AB 3002? So 3002 did come into effect July 1st, January 1st of 2019. I believe so. And it does mandate that you have to have a little preface online if you are using an online system to allow businesses to essentially go and route them via a hyperlink to the state contractors page. It's sort of like what we do to capture the CAS fee, that $4 fee for business licenses, but this just allows you to have the taxpayer direct them to that link if they have any disability access information. Also, if they ask for this language at the counter, you are now mandated to give it to them at the counter in paper form for free. So you don't charge them for any fees for printing costs by law. But you can utilize the CAS fee for this and that fee that you collect for that. Another question that's out there, public searchable database. Is there a law that states cities are required to publish business listings? If so, what if a customer requests their business not published? That is a great question, and that actually takes into account AB 2184. So with that, AB 2184 also states that you cannot publish online a home business address for the business, meaning that if you have a home occupancy or if your business utilizes a home address, your software will need to be able to have some sort of way to utilize it where they can show either, in our case, on file, or some other software. I'm not sure how they will utilize this process, but you have to pre-screen out. So you cannot have a home occupancy without their permission publishing businesses online that are based out of the home. That is part of AB 2184. So if you are currently doing this, whether it is for an online listing or whether it is for your online search mechanism, you need to be fixing this. So please contact whoever you utilize, whether it's an in-house provider or an outside software provider, to make this possible. You should not be showing a home occupation business. Let's see, we have some other questions that are coming in. Another question regarding the AB 2184. Is a business a home base or city required to hide the address? Yep, so we just mentioned that. Hopefully that answers your question as well, Michael. And Chris has a follow-up question to that. What if a business is not a home-based business? If it's not a home-based business and it's public record, it's public information. Each city clerk should have a listing of what is public information. Some vary. And if you have a question on that, please reach out to me after. I can give you the basics of what is public information. But like I said, each city, each county is different based on your city clerk's ability and what they think is public info. And when I say different, that means email addresses a lot of times. That might mean like a website, things of that nature. But the only way that a business should be hiding their form or their address is through the service of process, or we call SOP. And if that's the case, make sure that your software has the ability to mask that business address that they want to be hidden and have that ability for the service of process to display instead. Now, service of process, you just can't say, I have a service of process at this location. They have to have a form that is required where somebody can collect their mail on behalf of that business, whether it's a law firm, whether it's a different address, or an agency that's a property manager or a business manager of a multiple type agencies. You can't just have a service of process at a PO box or at a UPS store typically. This has to be at a different location where somebody can sign for mail. Let's see, another question. If the public requests an address of a business and it's home based, are we allowed to give the address out? Consult your city attorney on this. My first inclination would be no, but if your city attorney does say yes, then go with them on that one. Like I mentioned before, I can provide some tips and some points of what some of these items and articles and new laws may be covering. Let me know, reach out to me as well. Also, I can direct you to the state page, which will have the full information. I'm going to take one more question on this right now, and then we can do questions again at the end. So Holly has a question regarding AB 2184. Does a business owner have to or specify the SOP for the address to be blocked, or should all home-based businesses be blocked? To follow up, yes, all home-based businesses, according to this law, should be blocked to the public. Also, SOP gets into a lot of more detail regarding various departments having the ability to see things. So some departments, and it's up to you and what your interpretation of the law is, some departments don't even have the ability to see the original SOP functionality, or some can. So if you're a home-based business, though, or a home address, that should be blocked. If it's an SOP address, and they want to show that to the public, that's a question you're going to have to ask with your legal team. But for the most part, by default, home-based businesses should be hidden. All right. Thank you, everyone. If you have a question on this, please ask. Again, at the end, we do our Q&A section of it. All right. So 5 ideas to promote your online program. Number 1, if you currently charge a processing fee, consider lowering that fee for those that pay online. We mentioned this. There is no better encouragement than a lower cost. So if they can pay online for a cheaper rate, as Stephen mentioned, that he did with his cities, then they're going to push to that online. It's going to be more of a benefit for them. And even if you're a business owner or would be a business owner, you would utilize online too if it can save you some money. Promote paying online in your agency's email blasts, online newsletters, websites, Chamber of Commerce, newspapers, and even on the application and renewal forms themselves. So when I was working on the city side, I was sort of our city's PIO for a short period of time while we didn't have one. And when we did, I would work with them to get out those email blasts, get out those newsletters. We would make sure to contact our local newspapers that would publish, whether it's like a local paper, for instance, Orange County Register, Press Enterprise, the LA Times, maybe whatever your local one is. If you can get that out, and usually they have a local section. Talk to them, work with your local reporters to publicize that. It's free. It's free advertisement. And even if you have like a city manager or a mayor's blast or a newsletter that comes out, whenever it's time for renewals, or if you're a reoccurring renewal, you might want to mention a couple times a year, hey, did you know? Work with your Chamber of Commerce, right? And finally, that online application and renewal, you want to make that known, right? So go a step further on number 2 and bold or use red text. It might cost a little bit more for printing, or you can use catchy language such as pay online and save or pay online today. The more it stands out, the better chances you have for them to pay online. It's going to save you so much work than paying at the counter or by mail. Everything's done online. You just do a couple clicks, review it, and you're good to go. What we did also was we used a red stamp, and we stamped it on the back of every single envelope with renewals, and we sent them out, say, pay online. And that way, it was pretty easy. You just go from one and just stamp, 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 stamp. You can have somebody just have this for a little project they can do. And the first thing the customer sees before they even open up the envelope is the word or the 2 words, pay online. Also, set up a kiosk. You can do that at the front counter of your offices. This is great. Now, especially in COVID times, if you don't want to deal with them directly, and they can have the taxpayer do it all on that kiosk in front. And if they want the certificate right away or a receipt right away, they'll just contact you and you can print it out for them and they're good to go. It's a lot less that you have to deal with the customers right away. But for a kiosk, it might require you to set up that with your IT and having the funding to utilize that. All right, now's the time for any other questions that you might have. I really appreciate you guys joining on today. And here is my email in case you do have any questions or you want me to email some of those legislative articles. This COVID time is an unexpected opportunity to otherwise get some of those online business types and online businesses moving, which may have kept you waiting in the past, right? So now is the best time to actually utilize that online presence now more than ever. All right, looks like, let's see if we have anybody on the chat side of things. I don't see anything. All right, so So thank you all. If you have any questions, like I said, please reach out to me via email, or you can reach out and see the CMRTA website. Let me see if I have that on here. Nope, I don't. If you don't know yet, the CMRTA, let me see if I can, I'm going to go ahead and put the CMRTA Division 4 Gmail address out in the chat box to everyone. So we want to know what you hear, what we haven't listed, and we can always follow up with that in a future email to everyone via the listserv. So don't forget, we do have that legislative type update in a couple weeks, so we can explain a little bit more. If you have those questions, we can talk about more there. We do have another session next week on the business and professional code exemptions. It's a very, very informative presentation. So if you don't know about it yet, or want to learn more about what businesses are exempt from the tax in the state of California, and a lot of times in fees now, please tune in next week to that presentation. All right, well, thank you again. Appreciate you guys tuning in. And oh, we have a question real quick. Will this be archived? Yes, it'll be shown on the CMRTA website. So if you have access to the CMRTA website, you'll be able to see it on there online. There's a section right now called it's called free webinars, and you can look on that. It's a special YouTube page where you can link to it. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Be safe, and we will see you again in a couple weeks or next week even. Take care.